and aspects of us that we fall back to that make the idea of a mean a psychologically plausible claim. Yes?
With that same study, how do we know that it was the therapy that helped and not the waiting list that kept people depressed?
That's a good question. Yes, in that study, it's a perfectly good hypothesis that the sort of anxiety of being told, I see you've come here for help. We can't give it to you. Congratulations, you're a control group. Causes anxiety. In other studies, the control group doesn't know they're the control group. So sometimes you can do an intervention where you say, congratulations everybody in intro psych who did very low on the depression inventory, which many of you filled out. We're going to do something to you. And then the rest of people don't even know that they haven't been chosen. So you're right. It's a perfectly good point. Knowing you're not chosen could have a deleterious effect. And the way to respond to that is you have other studies that don't use that same method. Okay. I want to end with happiness, and it's a strange thing to talk about in psychology. Most of psychology focuses on human misery, most of clinical psychology. There's the psychology we spoke about through most of the semester on vision and language and social behavior, but typically when people think about interventions, what they think about is people having problems, and then we figure out how to make them better. They're schizophrenic, they're depressed, they're anxious, they're just not making it in life. And psychologists try to figure out how to make things improve. And in fact, a lot of the information I gave you at the beginning of lecture last class, where I reviewed all of the disorders, is in this wonderful book called DSM-4, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. If you really want to diagnose people and come to have a belief in your own mental instability, browsing through that book is a treat. Everything that can go wrong in mental life, from Asperger's syndrome to fetishes to paranoid schizophrenia, is all in that wonderful book. But a lot of psychologists have been disturbed by the focus of our field on taking bad people who are broken, people who are sad, and bringing them up to normal. And they've started to ask, can psychology give us any insight into human flourishing? How to take people how to study people who are psychological successes, how to take people who are psychologically okay and make them better. And this is the movement known as positive psychology, and it has its own handbook now, the Handbook of Positive Psychology, listing psychological strengths, listing virtues, ways, what psychology tells us about how we can be at our best. Some of this work in positive psychology is, in my mind, real crap. A lot of it is some combination of new age banalities by people who are striving to get more grant funds and end up on Time magazine. On the other hand, and so some of it is really bad. You could imagine this attracts every self-help huckster you could imagine. On the other hand, a lot of this work is quite neat, quite interesting, and quite promising. And what I want to do is tell you what I think is the most interesting research from this movement concerning happiness. Now, there are a lot of good books on this, and I'm going to recommend books, which I haven't been doing much in this class. Marty Seligman is the pioneer of positive psychology, and he's written an excellent book called Authentic Happiness. Jonathan Haidt is a brilliant young scholar who's also done a lot of work on disgust and morality. He did the sex with dead chicken study we discussed earlier. This is one of my favorite books, By Happiness by Nettle, because it's smart, it's beautifully written, and it's extremely short. And Dan Gilbert's book, Stumbling on Happiness, is a very, very funny book and very smart book, and is now in a New York Times bestseller list. So there's no shortage of books on happiness. So the starting point is, and a lot of research on happiness starts with a basic question: how happy are you? And we're psychologists, so tell us on a scale of 1 to 10, where 5 is average, 10 is super duper. The most common answers, interestingly enough, are high. They're 7 or 8. How many people in this room would give themselves a 7 or an 8? Okay. How many a 9 or a 10? All right. How many a 10? Good. Good. Maxed out on happiness. It turns out that most people think that they're pretty happy. There's a Lake Wobegon effect with happiness. Most people think they're very happy. In fact, most people think they're happier than most people, which shouldn't really happen. This question, how happy are you, from 1 to 10, has been asked all over the world. So, and it turns out there are slight differences depending on how old you are. There are slight differences depending on your place within a country, California versus New York. There are slight, subtle differences between men and women at different points. Somewhat paradoxically, although women are more vulnerable to depression than men, still, on average, women are slightly happier than men. The country-by-country data is quite interesting. In one study, they looked at 42 countries. The happiest people on Earth. Well, first, no country believed they were unhappy. The people in no country of these 42 countries. I mean, you're thinking there's some really bad countries to live in, and I don't know if they were tested. But of these 42, everybody said they were above average. The happiest people on Earth, the Swiss. They think they're just so happy. I was talking to people about this last night, and they suggested chocolate. The saddest people on the sample, the sad Bulgarians. You are wondering, what about Americans? Americans are actually pretty happy. 7.7 when we are a happy country, full of happy people. Now, I'm going to talk about a lot of research that's based on the data you get when you ask people how happy they are from a scale of 1 to 10. But I'm going to be honest and tell you there are reasons to be cautious about these numbers. And the reasons come from a couple of experiments. In one experiment, they asked people inside a psychology department where there was a photocopy machine. They went up to people, the people were going up to the photocopy machine to make copies, and when they were done making copies, they asked them, how happy are you with your entire life? There were 2 groups. Group A, they put a dime on top of the photocopy machine. So people walked around, I'm going to have to do my figure. Oh, a dime. Oh. Other group, no dime. It turned out that when asked, how good is your whole life? Group A reported greater life satisfaction overall in their entire lives. Another study asked people how happy you are with your whole life on sunny days, like today. And people said they were happier on sunny days than rainy days. What's interesting is you can make this effect go away if you ask immediately before, how's the weather? These were done by phone interviews. And logically, what seems to go on is that if you're asked how's the weather, oh, it's really sunny outside. And then when people are asked how happy are you with your whole life, people then say, oh, okay, I'm going to take into account the sunniness when I give my answer. Okay, so what is happiness? What are people rating when they're answering these sort of questions? And this is an extraordinarily difficult question, and one could devote a seminar to discussing it. But one simple answer from an evolutionary point of view is that happiness, forget about what is happiness, ask what's happiness for. Just like we've asked what language is for, or what laughter is for, or what hunger or lust is for. What's happiness for? And one answer is happiness is a goal state that we've evolved to pursue. It's a signal that our needs have been satisfied. Happiness is the carrot we're running towards that makes us take care of our lives. We want to be happy. An example of this is food. You're not very happy if you're starving. You want to be satiated. You want to be satisfied. So you seek out food to fill your belly. Once you've done it, you're happy. Steven Pinker summarizes The keys to